All right, let's talk about something we use every single day, but almost never really think about. Money. Specifically, where does it actually come from? Now, you probably think you have a pretty good idea. We all learned it in school, right? But what if I told you that pretty much everything you were taught is wrong? Let's kick things off by looking at the one big lie we all seem to believe.
Here it is. This feels right, doesn't it? It's so intuitive. You deposit your savings, the bank holds on to it, and then it lends that money to someone else who wants to buy a house or start a business. The bank is just a middleman, a kind of financial matchmaker. Simple, safe, makes perfect sense.
Except, it's not true. At all. In fact, it's a complete fiction. And if you don't get this one idea out of your head, you'll never, ever truly grasp how our modern economy really works, with all its crazy booms and busts and a lot of its inequality. This right here is the great money lie. Okay, so to get to the truth, we first have to kind of reboot our entire definition of what money even is. Because the cash in your wallet, that's just the tip of the iceberg. The real action, the vast majority of money, is digital.
This is the key. You have to stop thinking of money as a thing, like a gold coin. Modern money is just an entry in a ledger. That number you see in your bank account, it's really just a digital IOU from the bank to you. On their balance sheet, your deposit is a liability. It's a promise, and it's not created by printing presses, it's created with keystrokes.
So you see, not all money is created equal. There are a few different layers here. You've got the central bank money up top. That's physical cash and the reserves commercial banks use. Then there's some really complex stuff at the bottom we can ignore for now. But the one that matters for pretty much all of us, the one that makes up almost all the money in the economy, is right here, in the middle, commercial bank money. And that is created by private banks, like the one on your street corner.
And this, my friends, brings us to the core revelation. This is the big aha moment. So if banks aren't lending out the deposits they already have, where in the world does the money for a new loan come from? Well, the answer is kind of shocking, but also weirdly simple.
Let's walk through it. Say you get approved for a 10 lakh loan. The bank doesn't go and check a vault to see if they have 10 lakh lying around. Nope. What they do with just a few keyboard clicks is they simultaneously create two new entries on their books. One is an asset for them. That's the loan you owe them. The other is a liability, a brand new 10 lakh deposit in your account. And that deposit, that is brand new money created out of thin air.
Now look at this, because this slide shows the magic trick in action. On the left, before the loan, nothing's happening. On the right, after the loan is approved, poof, a loan asset and a deposit liability just appear out of nowhere, at the exact same instant, perfectly balanced. The money wasn't moved from anywhere else. It was just created.
And just so we're absolutely clear, this isn't some wild conspiracy theory. This is just boring, accounting reality. It's openly acknowledged and described by the biggest players in the game, the Bank of England, the US Federal Reserve, the IMF. This is literally how the plumbing of our financial system works.
So let's just burn that old, wrong idea to the ground and replace it with this one simple mantra. Say it with me. Loans create deposits, not the other way around. Once you get that, everything else starts to make sense.
You might be wondering, okay, so if private banks are just creating money left and right, what's the point of the central bank? Well, their role is huge, but it's more like the conductor of an orchestra, not the one writing the music. They don't command money creation, they just influence it.
Remember learning about fractional reserve banking? The idea that banks need to have a certain amount of cash in reserve before they can make a loan? Well, yeah, that's another thing that's not really true anymore. In the real world, banks lend first. They create the money, and then they go find the reserves they need afterwards. The central bank almost always supplies those reserves to keep the system from breaking.
So what actually stops banks from just creating an infinite amount of money? It's not a lack of deposits or reserves. The real limits are just good old-fashioned business and regulation. Questions like, is this loan actually going to make us money? Is this person likely to pay us back? And critically, does the bank have enough of its own money, its own capital, to take a hit if things go wrong? It all comes down to profitability, risk, and rules.
So here's the central bank's main weapon. By raising or lowering interest rates, they're not controlling the amount of money. They're controlling the price of money. They're making it more expensive or cheaper for private banks to create new loans. They control the incentive, but they don't control the act of creation itself. They can't force a bank to say yes to a loan.
Okay, so we've seen how money is born, but that's only half the story. Because what can be created can also be destroyed.
So just to quickly recap the creation site, a bank makes a new loan. Boom. The total amount of money in the economy just expanded. New digital deposits are created, and they start flowing through the system.
But here's the flip side that almost nobody thinks about. When you pay back your loan, I mean the principal, not the interest, the exact opposite happens. That loan asset and that deposit liability are wiped off the bank's books. They vanish. The money is destroyed, just as magically as it appeared. The overall money supply actually shrinks. Seriously, just by understanding that simple cycle that loans create money and loan repayments destroy money, you are now officially ahead of about 90% of the population when it comes to understanding how our economy actually works. That's a pretty big deal.
Okay, this has been a fascinating deep dive into accounting. But so what? Why does this actually matter in the real world? Well, it matters a lot, because this very mechanism of money creation has huge consequences for our economy and for who gets rich.
Just think about it for a second. New money doesn't just get sprinkled over everyone equally, right? It gets injected into very specific points. It's created by banks, and it's lent out to people and companies who are considered creditworthy, which, let's be honest, usually means people who already have assets they can put up as collateral. See where this is headed?
This is one of the biggest structural drivers of inequality in our system. The new money flows first into things like real estate and the stock market, pushing those prices up and up. Well, who does that benefit? The people who already own those assets. Meanwhile, wages for everybody else tend to grow much more slowly. It's not a bug in the system, it's a feature of how our money is created.
So let's lock in our new upgraded mental model. On the left, that's the broken model we're throwing away. On the right, that's reality. We now know banks are creators, not just middlemen. We know that money is basically just a form of debt, and that the whole system is driven by the expansion and contraction of credit.
And I'll just leave you with this final thought to chew on. Now that we know that almost all the money in our economy is a form of debt, what would happen if we actually succeeded in paying off all the debt? What would be left? Think about that one. Thanks for diving into this with me.